Okay, so shalom. So listen, this message is going to be really quick, right? I'm going to call this message Young Woman. Okay? The title of this message is Young Woman. Now, I want everybody to just pay attention. Okay? I'm just going to let the scripture speak. All right? It says, this is 1 Timothy chapter 5. This is 1 Timothy chapter 5. 1 Timothy, New Testament. 1 Timothy chapter 5. And I'm going to start at verse 9. Now, don't worry about what this chapter is about, because that's irrelevant to this message. I know that may be frustrating to some of you, but when I'm done, because this message is only going to be about 15 minutes, if that, don't worry about what the entire chapter is about. And I know this may sound oxymoron, right? Don't concern yourself about what this entire chapter is about. If you want to know what it's about, then you go read it for yourself. But I'm just going to read some scriptures, and at the end, you'll see why I read these scriptures, because these scriptures are just pertaining to the message that I'm trying to send. Okay? 1 Timothy chapter 5, and I'm going to start at verse 9. Verse 9. And it says, "Let a widow be enrolled if she is not less than 60 years of age, having been the wife of one husband." Let a widow be enrolled if she is not less than 60 years of age, having been the wife of one husband, and having a reputation of good works. If she has brought up children, has shown hospitality, has washed the feet of the saints, has cared for the afflicted, and has devoted herself to every good work. Now, I want to stop there for a minute, because let me explain something. You do not, I'm speaking to my black women, you do not have to be a virgin to be a righteous woman. Okay? All right? Just to let many of you women know that there was a prostitute by the name of Rahab in the scriptures who was deemed righteous according to Christ because of her faith. Now, I want you all to understand something. I'm not saying that, you women should be delving into that lifestyle, because wherever there's a so-called whore, there's a whoremonger. Okay? So, this is not to say that it matters whether or not you've been with men in the past. But many women have. And that does not mean that you can't be a righteous wife and that you can't be a good wife to a man. Okay? So I just want to throw that out there, that that's not even what this message is about. Okay? Because I know when I read from the scripture, especially when I do it, people take bits and pieces out and they throw the rock back at me. That's not what this is pertaining to. So when it says, having been the wife of one husband, that is irrelevant to this message. And there are women whom have dealt with men in the past, and the man that they're dealing with now, they are great wives too. Okay? So that's not what I'm saying, okay? So humbly, please don't throw the rock at me, because that's just a part of the scripture that I'm reading. But it has nothing to do with this message, and neither am I speaking derogatory to any of my sisters that have dealt with men in the past, because I'm not my wife's first. In fact, I'm her second. And in many cases, there are women who've had maybe more than one or two or three, four partners, And they found their king now, and they're very happy, and they treat him like gold. So, with all due respect to my sisters who are, married now, and they're treating their husbands gratefully, okay? So, I just want to read that again because this message is going to hit home. Like I said, it doesn't even matter what the whole chapter is about. Now, let me explain. It says, let a woman be enrolled if she's not less than 60 years old. So, do understand that women above 60, well, let me continue, okay? Just having a good reputation of good works, brought up children, washed the feet of the saints. But it then says, down in verse 11, then it go down to verse 11 and it says, but refuse to enroll younger widows. Now, I'm going to check with the KJV, okay, real quick. Give me a minute. Let me check with the KJV. That's the ESV, and the ESV is normally pretty good. But the younger women refuse. Okay, so in other words, because I've read the KJV, and the KJV says, but the younger women refuse. Okay, so it's not saying that the younger women themselves refuse. He's saying, but younger women refuse them. That's how he's saying it. Okay, so I want y'all to get that understanding. All right, so and it says, but refuse to enroll younger widows, for when their passions draw them away from Christ, they desire to marry. So a lot of our so now we're talking about younger women now, right? And it's gonna come full circle in just a minute. It says, let a widow, up top when I read it says, let a widow be enrolled if she is not less than 60 years old. And then we go down and it says, but refuse to enroll younger women, for when their passions draw them away from Christ, they desire to marry. So they want to marry now, so if they were brought up in the truth or whatever. And a lot of that really goes to a lot of our people were brought up in church, and being brought up in church didn't really teach us anything. But a lot of the young women that are brought up in church, their mind, they stray away from Christ, and it's not completely their fault because of all the lies being told in Christianity and the way Christianity paints the picture of the truth, paints the picture of the scriptures. A lot of people don't want to take the scriptures seriously. So I understand that in many cases. But it says here, for when their passions draw them away from Yahushua HaMashiach, then they desire to marry, right? And so incur condemnation for having. I'm gonna go to the KJV for that. Okay. So it says, so, but the younger women refuse, for when they have begun to wax wanton against Christ. Okay, so to negate Christ, then they marry, right? Having damnation, because they have cast off their first faith. So the first faith was Christ. So, see, you have to understand something, right? You have to stay in Yahushua HaMashiach in order to become, you have to stay in Yahushua HaMashiach in order to remain righteous in order so that the Spirit can go ahead and mold you, right? And bring you into righteousness, right? But if you cast off Christ, right? And this is what happens, right? It says, then they want to marry. So then they want to get with the brother, right? After they cast off Christ, right? Having them, then they will marry after they rejected Christ. Then they're married, right? Having damnation because they have cast off their first faith. And withal they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but tattlers, also busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. I will therefore that the younger women marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully. For some have already turned aside after Satan. Okay, why did I read this scripture? Because it says here, refuse the younger women, for when they have begun to wax wanton against Yahushua HaMashiach, they will marry, having damnation because they have cast off their first faith, and withal they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but tattlers and busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. I will therefore the younger women marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully. All right, now I want to go back to I'm going to get to my point in just a minute. It's a punchline to this, right? So the ESV 5:13 says, besides that, they learn to be idlers, going about from house to house, and not only idlers, but also gossips and busybodies, saying what they should not. So I would have younger widows marry. So now he's saying it preferably he would rather have younger widows marry, bear children, manage their households, and give the adversary no occasion for slander. See, the ESV says this better right here. Sometimes you got to go back and forth. So I would have younger widows marry, bear children, manage their households, and give the adversary no occasion for slander. For some have already strayed after Satan. If any believing woman has relatives who are widows, let her care for them. Let the church not be burdened, so that it may care for those who are really widows. Why did I read this? Slandering, gossiping, and busybody. Being, let me go to the Strongs here so I can break down. So the King James says, the King James says tattler. To be a tattler is a gossiper. It means garrulous, Garrulous means to be talkative, to gossip. A busybody. Curious. Curious. Aren't women curious? And it says here, working all around. Officious. Meddlesome. Neuter plural. Magic. So, it's also witchcraft. And also in busybody, speaking things which they ought not. He said, I will therefore, 14, I will therefore the younger women marry to bear children. In other words, he would rather for them to marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the devil, give none occasion to the adversary. Give not your attention to Satan. To speak reproachfully. To speak reproachfully is the Greek 3059 for slander. I want a lot of men out there to understand this very carefully. And I want y'all to really think about this one. Now, I understand you want to know, like, if somebody is preaching the word or speaking the word, then sure. I understand that you might want to make sure that this person is not the worst of them. I understand that. I understand that. But beyond that, to be curious, and to gossip, and to slander, these are the things that women do. Not only women, but young women. Young women. So even a woman that's above the age of 60 years old is more stand up than some of you camp leaders. I know women that really, they get out of that. Some women that have not left their first faith. Some women, and a lot of you women, I notice you like to say things about Muslim women, but at least they cover their bodies, the ones that attempt to be real about it. At least they cover up. But that's not what this message is about. Some women, even when they're young, if they don't leave, listen to me, if they don't leave their first love, which is Yahushua HaMashiach, they never become gossipers, curious, slanderers. They never do that even at young age. But for a lot of you women out there that do this, and it's mostly black and white women, black and white women, because the women of other nations, they do it. The women of other nations, they do it, but not as much as American women who are born here in America. You all love that thing. But in many cases, women tend to grow out of that. That's the reason why he said a woman not less than 60, enroll them, because she's mature. And she has no need to involve herself in these things. Because to gossip, to slander, and to speak behind another brother's back or another woman's back is a female character trait. and to be curious and to always want to be involved and get the latest scoop on this man. I can see, like, if you just had all of these hard rock things that's definite, and you know what I'm saying, but for a man at really any age, because the woman has to grow out of it. It should never, that's the reason why we have to get back into the laws of Elohim. See, my sons will be raised in the Torah so that they don't have these character traits when they're young. See, now some of these men, they've even had a father at home, right? Some of these men will have both mother and father. And they're still curious. And they're still gossipers. And they're still slanderous. And they're still these things. They still want the latest scoop on the soap opera at hand. I would bet that you leaders of the organizations that involve yourself in this, I would bet you watch soap operas. See, this is why I don't follow men, because you never know who you're following. These are the same men that speak about this man being this man being that. And I bet these same gossipers and slanderers can't even put brakes on a car, brake pads on a car. They're hypocrites, throwing rocks and hiding their hands, and dealing in gossip and slander with women.